Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. Sorry, I know I've been a little, I don't know, maybe lax on posting lately because I'm still moving and, but we're making progress. You can see I got everything's up, everything's functioning, but, I still need to hang some stuff on the walls and things like that. Um, but I did want to get this video out, and this is kind of a big video for me because I've got a lot of amps right now, and if you watch my previous video about like just my thoughts on moving and things like that, I'm really feeling the need to simplify and to get pared down to just the things that I'm like actually going to use on a regular basis and the things that I really, really enjoy the most. So I need to do this review so I can sell most of these amps that I have here. So let me tell you, so this is going to be, like, I did a solid state shootout, a while back, and I'll drop a link down to that below so you can kind of go check out my thoughts on some of these other solid state amps, but this is going to be kind of another solid state amp shootout. So let's take a look at the contenders. Now, I'm also going to make an effort to do this rather quickly because a lot of these amps have very similar functionality. Once you've seen kind of one amp, you've seen them all as far as like, yeah, they turn on, they turn off. Here's where you put the headphones, RCA in, RCA out, that type of thing. Okay, so I will do that very quickly for each of the amps in this video, but I'm not going to belabor those points a whole heck of a lot. So let's just do a quick rundown. What do we have in this shootout? We've got a lot of shit. So we've got the Asgard 3, we've got the IEMagni, and we've got the Magni 3 Plus. Okay. Then we've got a JDS Labs L Amp 2, and then we've got an Audeze Deckard. So a bunch of American amps today is what we're looking at. All solid state. We've got a couple of different kind of things going on here, but let's just very quickly go over each of the amps. We'll talk power, we'll talk inputs, outputs, things like that, and I'll just show you quick like what the power chords are like, so you know what you'd be getting into with that. So let's start with the Schiit products, just because they're all fairly similar. So we've got the just Magni 3 Plus. Okay, so Magni 3 Plus, quarter inch out, volume knob, and then on the back, RCA's in, RCA out, high-low gain, and power on and off, and the AC in. And the power brick for that guy is this thing. So it's a big wall brick, and I don't know, maybe about like 5 feet of cable. This is the same, basically the same. It's not, the specs aren't exactly the same on it, but it's basically the same form factor of this for the IEMagni. And the IEMagni, just to see real quick, is pretty much like exactly the same as far as volume knob, quarter inch, RCA in, RCA out. High, low, and medium gain that's kind of the thing that's special about the IEMagni, right? Is that it has a really low gain on it, specifically for IEM use. The other Schiit amps that I know of don't have this. And then on, off, and power in, all that. Okay, so the Asgard 3, you can see, is just it's way more heft, right? It's way more heft than the Magnis. It feels extremely well built. Extremely well built. Love the build of this thing. Knob feel on this is much, much better. I really like the volume knob on this. You've got source select on the front because you can get a built-in DAC into the Asgard 3. I don't have that. I just have the amp. And then you've got the high-low gain on the front, quarter inch. Back is really pretty similar to the Magnis in that you got RCA and RCA out power. You'll see though that this uses kind of your standard power cable, which is just like the got one here. it's just kind of like your standard like PC cable. I don't really know what the right name for these are, but just the regular cable, 3-plug cable is what comes with that guy. Okay, so now Element or L-Amp 2. Sorry, L-Amp 2. This is the L-Amp 2. You can see as far as like amp designs go, this is maybe one of the more interesting. It's like a really nice desktop design. It's very thin. Again, feels really well built. Not very heavy as far as like the metal and stuff goes. It's not like... I'd say this is on... It's closer to the quality of the Magnis than it is to the Asgard 3 in build quality. The knob is really kind of cool, this giant knob, and then there's an LED that's underneath of it. The knob feel on this, I maybe don't like it quite as much as the Asgard 3, but it's better than the Magnis. It's really, really low resistance. It feels nice, it's smooth. Maybe you'd be into that. I kind of like a little more resistance with my volume knobs. As long as they're still smooth, the Magnis can be like a little rough compared to the other ones. Okay, so as far as functionality goes, with the L-Amp 2, it's very similar to any of those Schiits. You've got RCA in, RCA out, you've got gain and power, and these are just click buttons. I prefer the toggles myself, but it works. It works, and the buttons feel good. It also comes with a very similar power brick to the Magnis, which is to say, it's a big brick that plugs into the wall, and then you get a decent amount of cable in that. Lastly, the one that's maybe a little bit more different from the rest of these is the Deckard. This thing, again, is huge. All aluminum, very solid, beautiful amp. Nice big volume knob, great feel. And it is different because this does have a built-in DAC. And it's got input select on the front. And it's got high, low, medium gain on the front as well. Again, a 1/4 inch there. And on the back, you've got a toggle switch for on-off. You can see the power cable comes in. It's just like the Asgard power cable. Again, just kind of like one of those standard computer cables. You got RCA ins, RCA outs, and you got the USB in. Now, okay, so just a quick note on functionality here between the preamp functions of these different amps, as I had to go back and clarify this. So the Deckard works like the Schiit amps do in that they have preamp functionality, but that is only switched on when you unplug your headphones from the headphone jack, the 1/4 inch jack in the front of those amps. And so that's the same for all the Schiit amps and the Deckard. The JDS Labs L-Amp 2 still can only do one output at a time, but you can leave your headphones plugged in and you actually push and hold one of the switches on the back for about a second, and then it will switch between headphone amp and preamp mode. So, depending on your use case, you might find one of those functions better than the other. Build quality. Let's talk about just kind of like which ones I think are better. I would actually say I'm going to give it a tie between the Magnis and the L-Amp 2. I like the form factor of the L-Amp 2, but I like the build quality more of the Magnis. The volume knob is better on the L-Amp 2, but like the Magnis just feel more solid to me, so I don't know, toss up. Then it'd be the Asgard 3, and then the best build is definitely the Deckard, for sure. Knob feel is the same. So Deckard, Asgard, L-Amp, and then the Magnis have the worst knob feel. And if you felt one Magni knob, you've felt them all. They're kind of scratchy and have a lot of resistance, and I'm just not a big fan, but hopefully you're not messing with it all that much when you're using it. If you're the type of person that's messing with the volume knob a lot, I don't know, maybe steer clear from the Magnis as far as that goes. Let's talk power real fast, and rather than me trying to like rattle off a bunch of numbers to you. I'm just going to post them on the screen and just give you like a couple of minutes to like look at them to compare. I'll try to get as comparable numbers as I can. That can sometimes be difficult as far as like depending on what specs they actually post. So here we go. Go ahead and look on the screen. Here's all the power on top of the amps so you can see them. Okay, and then, I'll drop links to all these as well down in the description. So, if you want to go look at the specs and things a little bit closer, there'll be links to all these things down there. What I would say is I wouldn't stress about power too much. Really, they're pretty comparable with the exception of the Asgard. It is a quite powerful amp. But the reality is that for me and for 90% of headphones, these are all going to do just fine, like as far as power requirements go. The IEMagni is kind of cool because it has that super low gain stage, but also the Deckard has that too, and these all have high-low gains, so I never found it to be too much of a problem, but maybe if you're a super sensitive IEM user, looking at like the IEMagni might be the place to start. Or the Deckard. The Deckard I love, and we'll talk more about that here in a little bit, but it's hard for me to recommend it just because I don't think it's going to be very easy for most people to locate one, because you can't buy it anymore, and I've only seen one for sale ever, I think, on the forums that I patrol. So even though, spoiler, that's my favorite one, we're going to talk about like some other options that you can use as well. Let's go ahead and get into sound, though. We got, so as far as sound goes, I'm gonna hit kind of the curb notes here of these, and it's really more about some overall impressions as far as in-depth reviews of sound. The short answer is I like them all. I would take any of these amps and I could be happy listening to them forever. But there's little nuances and differences between them that make it, I don't know, it makes you really want to kind of get the one that you like, as long as you're that type of person. If you're the type of person that you just like want to get an amp and you want it to sound decent, probably any of these fit that bill, all right? If you're pickier, or maybe you want to get one and then try another to compare, I think that's kind of the way I do. I just get out of hand sometimes and get too many because I pick them up when I see a good deal on one, right? So let's start with the Magnis. The Magni 3 Plus is an interesting amp. It is probably the most colored out of any of these, and that maybe warrants taking a look at it just for something a little bit different. It's very lively, but it's not as refined. So it's got a lot of excitement and engagement listening to it, but then there's also like the bass is a little bit loose on it, and maybe it can get a little bit the imaging maybe isn't quite right on it and is messed with a little bit, but it is a rather fun little amp to listen to. So I do like it. I would recommend it, and I think really an interesting way to start into this hobby would maybe be get like the Magni 3 Plus and get the IEMagni both. The IEMagni is quite a bit different from the Magni 3 Plus in that it is much more refined, but it loses a lot of that liveliness. So it's just a tighter, cleaner overall sound, and that's going to be one of the ones that I keep just because I think it's a good reference starting point for just like what a clean, uncolored amp sounds like. So I like the IEMagni a lot, and but I think there's a case to be made for owning both of those amps. Let's jump over to kind of the Asgard 3 because that's still kind of in the Schiit family. And I would say that, like, really what I noticed, the big difference I noticed from going from either the Magnis to the Asgard 3 is the sense of space that it conveys. So it's a very thick welcoming amp sound. Still retains a lot of detail, so it's kind of like it adds more liveliness and space than the IEMagni, but it is more refined than the Magni 3 Plus. So it's kind of sits in a nice middle ground, but this, and it has like a weight to it. Like it really has a very, the bass isn't as tight as the IEMagni, but it's got just a kind of a nice warmth, a nice thick weight to it that is quite enjoyable on a lot of the headphones that I tried with it. So I do really like the Asgard 3. That's an easy recommendation for an amp. It has more power than you're like ever gonna need probably. And it still has a nice high-low gain, so I never had any problems running IEMs off of it either. So I do like that one. Again, though, I think there could be a case to be made for having it and the IEMagni, just because the IEMagni, again, is just like a cleaner, tighter amp, whereas the Asgard 3 is a spacious, thick, and just inviting amp and signature. Now, it is probably the widest out of any of these amps on the table here, and that can be good and bad. So that's kind of like a track by track basis almost for me, where sometimes I would find that space and the sense of space it gives like really engaging, but sometimes it would be like the vocals might be like a little too distant or things like that. So it can be good. Again, I think having two different amps is not bad, because then you can kind of like, if you're hearing something weird on one, you can flip to another and see if it sounds the same, and maybe it's just the track, or if maybe it's just the track, the headphone, the amp, how they're all working together to present it, maybe is throwing something off a little bit. So I think that's kind of my thoughts on the Asgard 3. It does sound very natural. I would say the timbre on it is a little bit more natural than the Magnis as well. So it's just organic, thick. It's nice. It's a nice amp. Next, let's jump over to the L Amp 2. And to be honest, this is probably my least favorite sounding amp on the table here. And that's not to say that there's anything like glaringly wrong with it. It's quite clean, but it adds a little more liveliness than, say, like the IEMagni. So it's probably as clean as the IEMagni, but just is a little more lively. But I thought there were instances where it just presented maybe like a little too much energy in the upper mids, lower treble that I didn't find super appealing on some of the headphones that I was trying it with. So it is still super clean. It's got more sense of space than either of the Magnis do. So the sense of space is maybe it's not quite as wide as the Asgard 3, but it's bigger than the Magnis. But again, there were just sometimes it just got to be a little much for me. But it is a very exciting and engaging, while still being pretty clean, headphone amp. Okay, now the Deckard. So my favorite of the amps on the table. The Deckard, I'd say, combines like almost all of my favorite things of all these amps into just one nice, easy to listen to, but still engaging package. So I think the Asgard 3 could sometimes be a little distant and not super engaging, and the L Amp 2 could sometimes be too forward and too lively. The Asgard 3. The Deckard, I feel like, sits kind of right in the middle of that, to where it's pretty mellow to listen to, but it has just enough liveliness that it keeps me engaged. And just out of all the amps, like, the Deckard is just the one that I constantly go back to, and every time I go back from one of the other amps into the Deckard, I'm like, yeah, the Deckard. So the Deckard is just all in all my winner here. It just has a natural smoothness to it. It's got a good sense of space, although it's not as wide as either the Asgard 3 or the L Amp. I do think it's wider than the Magnis. It's still probably not quite as clean as the IEMagni is, but I'm willing to sacrifice like a little bit of that cleanliness to gain some life and some engagement into my music. The Deckard, I've had, like, it does I'd say the great majority of the headphones I pair with it sound wonderful. I do with the Deckard more than maybe like the IEMagni. Like the IEMagni is going to be safe with like any headphone pretty much. But like the Deckard does have like some instances where it will pair a little oddly with some headphones. I can't think of anything off the top of my head right now, but I do know that that's been the case. But just in general, I just really like the Deckard, and I think the sound on it is just, it's hard to argue with. I think it's an easy sound to like, and it works well with the great majority of headphones that you're going to throw at it, if you can find it and find it at a decent price. Because this thing was like an $800 DAC amp when it came out. I got mine for around $200, and I think at that price, this thing is like just a screaming deal, and I just really, really enjoyed it. And we'll talk more about this when I do a video on the Bifrost 2, which I have on hand now too. But the DAC in the Deckard is pretty decent too. And so for a clean, simple solution, what I am going to move forward with right now, I'm still going to do some more time with the Bifrost 2, but what I'm going to stick with for now is I'm going to stick with the Deckard as kind of my main, but I'm going to keep the IEMagni as well, just as like an alternative, super clean amp that I can switch back and forth to if I feel like I need to just double check something that I'm hearing with a headphone. So I hope that helps. If you're looking or considering any of these amps, again, I think like any of them, if you can get a good deal on them, I think they're all great amps in their own right. Again, I think if you're just starting out, I think getting something like maybe the IEMagni and the Magni 3 Plus together and deciding which one you like better, that will maybe inform you on where you want to go from there as far as your amp hunts go. But for all of this, I would say, you know, certainly don't feel like you need to hear them all. A lot of the differences are really, really small between them. And, you know, unless you're just super crazy like person like I am and you feel like you got to hear the differences between all of them, you're probably going to be happy with any of them is the short story. One thing that I noted, so you know what headphones I was using to test this with, I've got an Edition XX on hand right now. I've got my LCD2 pre-phasers. I've got a set of Aleers and the Nighthawks, the OG Nighthawks. Like those are kind of what I did this with, this little sampling. And I can tell you 100% that switching headphones is going to make way, way, way more of a difference than switching between any of these amps. So just keep that in mind, right? If you've got a set of headphones that you just love and you know those are your headphones and that you're going to keep, like that's when maybe you want to play around with amps if you've got an acceptable amp already. If you're not sure about the headphones yet, then I would pin down your headphones before you spend a whole lot of time trying a bunch of different amps. But that's just me. You know, everybody goes through their audio journey a little bit differently, and that's okay. That's cool. So you do you. But you know, if you're into talking about audio and headphones, and you want to, you know, spend a little more time discussing some of these things, certainly subscribe to the channel, drop comments down below. I'll do my best to answer them, or maybe there's a question that I missed that you feel like I missed in this video because I was just kind of glossing over a lot of these. You know, certainly get involved, start a discussion. Happy to get a dialogue going with you on that. And I think that's going to wrap it up for this big amp video, and I hope it helped. And I hope to see you back at the channel for the next video. So thanks for tuning in. I'll see you next time.